So now that you have a basic understanding of systems thinking, thanks to Emily's presentation, we're going to take a look at how the systems mindset is applied through integrated regional water management. Daniel Kozad referenced integrated planning more generally in his Santa Ana watershed history, and Emily briefly mentioned IRWM in her last session in the context of managing socio-ecological systems. Now we're going to cover what IRWM actually is. At its core, IRWM, or IRWM, Integrated Regional Water Management, seeks to consider how regional water management as a system is interconnected with a wide spectrum of other fields and other concepts, such as land use planning, agriculture, industry, recreation, and environmental quality. Linking these big ideas into the existing structures of society is our challenge. True leaders, hopefully all of you, will help us move from the single purpose thinking to the systems thinking. Our goal for these workshops is that all of you as watershed ambassadors will have a better understanding of and be comfortable enough with the concepts of integrated socio-ecological systems to aid us in that transition. Now, historically, we have thought of water as good or bad. Given the complex history of water in our state, and especially in Southern California, it's clear that it has not been thought of or considered as part of an integrated system. Good water is generally what we think of as drinking water, sanitation, and water for recreation, and sometimes even for ecosystems or habitat. Bad water is usually things like flooding, stormwater, untreated sewage, and contaminated or polluted water. Things that we don't like or don't want to come into contact with. The divide between good water and bad water mirrors our historical relationship to both natural and social infrastructure. It's also echoed in the infrastructure we built to manage both good versus bad water. We designed our physical infrastructure and, by implication, our human, social, and institutional infrastructures to manage good water separately from bad water. We have separate pipes and separate treatment facilities to bring safe drinking water into our homes, to take wastewater away from our homes, to send irrigation water to our fields, and we even manage surface water independent of groundwater. Essentially, we're managing many waters instead of one water. Now we need to restructure our systems, both physical and institutional, in order to better manage the socio-ecological systems in which we find ourselves today. Now, this crazy diagram is a network map of water management in Southern California. Water and the interconnections it demands between managers is more complex than any other public administrative challenge. This network map, each dot is a component of water management, like water quality, wastewater, all of the facets of water management we've discussed already, and each square is an agency. The lines connect the agencies to the factors of water that they manage. So the map as a whole demonstrates those interactions between agencies and the broader water system. But just because they impact one another and interact with one another does not make them integrated. Integrated watershed scale management and planning has emerged as a means to encourage all the entities, all of these agencies, the squares in this map that govern water or provide water to work together towards shared goals. Shared goals such as mitigating areas of conflict and leveraging resources to achieve shared objectives and outcomes. Integrated watershed scale management and planning as a general concept takes a more holistic approach. It includes all of the interconnected components, topics, or issues that impact a community, and it figures out how to achieve a shared vision for all of those parts collectively. Or ideally, it produces an outcome that is greater for all rather than coming up with a plan or a vision for each of the individual components. IRWM is inherently multi-benefit. Integrated planning should, at minimum, include social, ecological, and economic factors. Those are the three main circles in the center of this graphic. Which subcategories you include within those three broad areas are innumerable. Some of the most common are outlined here. The boxes surrounding the circles: fish and wildlife, wetlands, non-point source pollution, You name it, they could go on forever. Integrated planning experts agree that the most effective scale at which to conduct master planning is at the watershed or basin scale. However, you do have to take into account the natural, physical, and hydrologic constraints of your region. Now, the concept of integrated watershed scale planning and management has been interpreted in California into a voluntary planning and funding program, Integrated Regional Water Management, IRWM, which is administered by the Department of Water Resources, DWR. The program was first created in 2002 by the legislature's Irwin Planning Act. And since then, it's deployed billions, yes, billions of dollars in state bond funding. Early bonds were Prop 50, Prop 1E, and Prop 84. More recently, there is a large influx of funding into IRWM from Prop 1. Prop 68 is our most recent bond, but there wasn't a whole lot of Irwin funding in that one. The official goals of the Irwin program are to, 1, increase regional self-reliance, water self-reliance, of course. 2, reduce conflict between agencies and stakeholders. And 3, manage water to concurrently achieve social, environmental, and economic objectives. Voluntary Regional Water Management Groups, or RWMGs, formed around self-defined watershed boundaries. This happened back in the early 2000s when the act was first passed. And once they formed their watershed groups, they developed Irwin plans to manage their watershed. There are now over 40 such groups covering more than 90% of the entire state. State agencies act as partners in the Irwin program by developing principles for advancing regional objectives and implementing those regional plans. They also set the criteria for distributing water bond funds across the 12 funding areas. This map shows those 12 funding areas. In the Santa Ana River watershed, SAPA manages the Irwin program. SAPA is a joint powers authority made up of 5 member agencies: San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District, Inland Empire Utilities Agency, Western Municipal Water District, Orange County Water District, and Eastern Municipal Water District. Daniel's history of the watershed brought us up through the 1950s and 60s and the litigation that occurred during that time, highlighting that the region has a very long tradition of conflict. SAPA was actually born directly out of that conflict. The courts required these agencies to work together in order to solve their collective water quality issues rather than suing each other. The 4 original parties to the lawsuit formed the Santa Ana Watershed Planning Agency and developed a comprehensive water quality management plan for the Santa Ana watershed. Eastern Municipal, as I mentioned, is one of the 5 agencies. They didn't join until 1984. So this original plan was completed in 1972 and then incorporated into the State Water Resources Control Board Basin Plan. This plan obviously predates the Irwin program, which I just told you didn't start until 2002. SAPA and its comprehensive water quality management plan was actually the inspiration for the statewide Irwin program. For decades, SAPA has served as a model for collaboratively solving regional water management issues. One of the best examples, besides the Irwin program itself, is the Inland Empire Brine line, which is depicted as the dark blue line in the watershed map on the left side of this slide. The Brine line removes over 500,000 pounds of salt from the watershed every day. And for those of you that especially manage irrigation, you understand how important it is to get that salt out of the water. Other impressive examples of collaboration in the watershed include the very first desalter in the Inland Empire and the Stringfellow acid pits cleanup. The One Water, One Watershed program has generated additional water supply for the region and brought additional financial investments to the region as well. These are both depicted in the graphs on the right-hand side of the slide. So in the Santa Ana watershed, the IRWM implementation process is called One Water, One Watershed. Some people call it OWOW for short, others call it OW. Collaboration leads to amazing outcomes, but sometimes it's a painful process. SAPA uses task forces to build relationships among regulators, the regulated parties, and its member agencies. And this collaboration enables joint efforts that provide economies of scale, reduce costs, and increase benefits for all. You can get more involved in the OWOW process or the OWOW process, whichever you prefer, by joining one of the task forces that SAPA operates, or by becoming part of the OWOW steering committee. You can find more on SAPA's website, and we'll drop a link to that website in the chat. The OWOW plan is guided by 3 core principles, which align nicely with the Irwin program principles and what we spoke about earlier regarding systems thinking and socio-ecological systems. These 3 core principles are creating a shared vision for a healthy, productive watershed, collaborating with watershed citizens across jurisdictions for shared solutions, and following a systems approach to finding synergies that overcome interrelated problems. Now, remember I said collaboration can be a painful process. In 2018, Orange County formed its own regional water management group. It was originally part of OWOW, and now it has its own IRWM. And they did this so that they could address more specific challenges unique to their region or sub-region. Collaboration between agencies and across IRWM groups, especially between OWOW and the new Orange County IRWM, are critical to the resilience of the Santa Ana watershed. The region faces numerous water challenges, as you are already aware, and has limited resources to address them. I think I skipped a slide, sorry guys. These scarce resources can be leveraged, and cost-effective solutions can be found by collaborating with all parties dependent on the watershed's resources.